Welcome back, everybody, to the engineering stage. I'm so excited to be here with my good friend Dantley Davis. My name is Morgan DeBon. I'm the CEO and founder of Blavity Inc. Dantley, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How are you, Morgan?
I'm feeling good. There's nothing I love more than AfroTech. So it's good. It's my favorite time of year. Bummed that we're not in person, but really excited that we can be more open, more accessible, and hope that this kind of continues the entire ethos of why we do what we do as tech leaders here and trying to make sure that more and more people can be in this tech world together. So pumped. For those people who don't know, walk us through like your origin story. So where are you from originally? How did you kind of first get into tech? You're an OG for sure. Worked at so many amazing companies early on as well. But I want to get started just with the beginning.
My story starts in Kunsan Air Base, Korea. My dad was in the military, and as a career military man, I'm privileged to have traveled all around the world and in many different places in the U.S. as a kid, and I was exposed to a lot of different people and a lot of different cultures. And early in my life, I used to take apart my dad's stereo equipment when he would bring it back from overseas. He got tired of me doing that, so he got me a used computer when I was 8 years old, and I started programming at 8. I was hacking computer games, and that's how I learned Photoshop and a bunch of tools to make graphics. Back then, I didn't even know what that was. I was just a kid having fun. And when I got to high school, a teacher of mine basically enlightened me that I had a bunch of skills that could be used in the professional world. And she showed me a curriculum at an art school, and I applied and I got in. It just happened to be the beginning of the .com boom. And I worked with some DJs. That work then got me noticed by agencies in San Francisco. As a freshman in college, I threw all my belongings in a U-Haul truck. I didn't even pack it. I just threw it all in the back of a U-Haul truck. Drove to San Francisco, and the rest is history.
Wow. So you went straight into SF. You didn't even do the whole like San Jose, like Oracle world. You went straight in.
Straight in.
So like tell just so, because we got a lot of youngins in the audience. So just to like rewind, like the .com era, describe it, like what were the companies that were popping up at that time? Like who were the cool kids? Like the cool kids for us are Facebook, Twitter, Netflix, etc. But like what were the cool kids back then?
Yeah, so back then, it looked nothing like what we have today with AfroTech, that's for sure. I was always the only brown person in the building. And the companies back then were Excite, Yahoo, Ask Jeeves, bunch of companies you probably haven't heard of, like Pet Stuff.
I know Ask Jeeves. I'm not that old. Ask Jeeves was that was our Wikipedia before I think Wikipedia was a thing.
It was, yeah. And then you had the Stewarts, like Netscape, and there was a core contingent of software companies that were making software for CD-ROMs. And I'm not sure if anyone remembers those days, but the Intuits and those types of companies that were shipping products to stores for you to buy and install on your computer. That was the primary basis of Silicon Valley back then.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to Best Buy and my mom picking up the box for TurboTax. I worked at Intuit, so I was at Intuit when that old guard of like the originals kind of were passing through, and they were doing their big transition to like all SaaS and trying to convince accountants to stop trying to get like a CD in the mail, So yeah, it feels like a long time ago, but really wasn't that long ago, frankly. So, all right, fast forward a little bit. You're in SF, you are in the mix with everything happening. How did you make your transition into product design, research, and really kind of the forward-facing experience for huge platforms?
So it started with me designing websites for e-commerce companies. So it wasn't even called e-commerce back then. It was mostly brochureware. And I saw that there was this degree of interaction that was starting to become capable via a web browser that you would have on a desktop PC. So I studied a lot of the human interface standards for operating systems for both Mac OS and Windows. And I started to apply that to the work I was doing on the web. And there was this growth that was happening on the internet around rich internet technology and interactions. And I started to apply both the systems level thinking that I was learning and the visual design and engineering background that I had together in one place. And that work, and at this point in my career, I was usually the youngest person on the team. I was maybe 19 years old, 20 years old. And I had all these skills that in many cases, people 2 times older than me were just learning. So it really propelled me to basically be thrown at some of the hardest problems at the companies I was working at. And at that time, there was a lot of startups. And then that got me noticed by a company that was just starting to emerge called PayPal. And I joined PayPal during some of the early days of when that company was starting to get traction. And mobile started to become a thing. Obviously, peer-to-peer payments was starting to blow up. And I think that's really what gave me the fortitude to continue to push forward in interactive design.
Yeah, wow. I mean, you've picked some winners, right? So just walk the people through all the top companies you've worked for. I want to get to Twitter because I have so much that I want to talk about there, but just so that everybody kind of has the receipts, you've come through a lot of cool places.
Thanks, Morgan. So as you alluded to, I'm at Twitter now. I'm the Chief Design Officer at Twitter. Prior to Twitter, I was at Facebook for a few years, and I spent 7 years at Netflix. So if you're using one of the Netflix interfaces, that was the last project that I led as a designer. I started there as a lead designer, left as a design director, and I saw that company transition from a DVD company to a streaming company, and that was a really amazing ride. I spent a few years working on video games. My career started in games, and I was given this opportunity to work at a startup developing games for PCs and consoles. And that was really transformative for me because one of the goals of games is fun. And regardless of how effective your interface is, if people aren't enjoying the experience, then you're not really creating a good one. And that taught me a lot of the foundational work that I leveraged when I was at Netflix. I also spent some time at Yahoo and various startups of all sizes over my career, and some time at agencies as well.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. All right, so let's talk about Twitter. You report directly to Jack, right?
That's correct.
How fun is that? We'll get to that later. So Chief Design Officer, what does that mean? What does that entail? I mean, for a company as impactful and huge as Twitter, what does that really translate into?
So myself and my team are responsible for all aspects of design and research at Twitter. That includes all the product work within the app. Also includes all of our experiences for businesses in terms of how they launch brands and advertising on our platform. And all the research that we do to develop insights to understand what is most meaningful to both the community and our core customers. One of the things that I'm also responsible for, and one of the things that Jack asked me to do by coming to the company, was also to help guide the company through design. So we work really closely with our policy teams. We work closely with our legal teams to think about how the policies on the platform translate into product level impact and engagement, or even in situations in which bad things happen on the platform by bad actors. How do we communicate that to the community, to the individuals? And oftentimes these are design problems. The policy is written, but if it's just posted on a blog somewhere, then no one knows about it. No one knows how to respond about it. So we're starting to think more critically around how we make product changes to provide additional balance to some of the policies that are on the platform.
Right. And remind me, how long have you been there? It's been about 2 years, or how long?
A year and a half.
A year and a half. Right. So you were there AfroTech last year, but you had just joined.
That's right.
Okay. So we've seen a crazy amount of changes since you've joined Twitter. But prior to you, like, Twitter was basically the same thing it launched with, at least from a user point of view. It didn't feel like they really did that much in terms of innovating, in comparison, like a Facebook, which launches a new whole thing every year, every 2 years. Do you think that that's because like Twitter, people already use it really well, and so the company just never felt like it needed to change that aggressively, or like, why is that? What is that? To explain to us. And then, I want to get into some of the things that you have changed and worked on in the last 18 months.
So I think there's a lot of factors in terms of speed at Twitter. One of which is, for folks who are veterans in tech, it's probably no surprise to hear that Twitter's had a lot of leadership change over the last 5 years, and also trying to figure out what it's going to be when it grows up. And the company had a very strong use case in terms of public conversation, and I think they've been trying to figure out how to make that experience the best it can be. And we're at a place now where we have our heads around the public conversation and how to enable people to connect and have meaningful discussions about some of the most important things that are happening in the world. And now we're thinking more meaningfully about how we can enable people to still leverage the best of Twitter, but also service some other additional use cases. And in some ways, what that means is smaller groups of people connecting. In other cases, it might mean longer form content being part of the Twitter experience. And also the team has been focused extensively on creating a healthier platform. So everything from our agent team to our ML and AI models. And I know, we're not nowhere near where we aspire to be, but the team has been focused on ensuring that mostly positive conversation can happen on Twitter and debate can happen without trolls and harassment and harm. And the folks who are engaging in the platform that way, they're not sleeping at night. They're not resting. And so we have to continue to adapt our work to ensure that we can make a platform that lives up to our expectations. And the work that you'll see coming out of the company over the next couple of years will be focused heavily on how to foster a more productive conversation, both on Twitter and then in the internet as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, Twitter is not the only platform that is working through that huge challenge, right? And I mean, Facebook, of course, significantly. Reddit, I think, has gone through it as well. As a Black person, as Black folks, I think we've become more aware of the impact of like having safe spaces, and then also having spaces that we thought were safe become volatile, right? And we've also seen the impact of a lot of people acting like they're Black, and us as a community taking that bait. There's been times even, running a news company where we became aware that, oh snap, the article we thought, we were reporting on a tweet because it started this whole thing, but the tweet was fake, right? And so we've had to, I think I might have DM'd you that one time, but like, it's been such an eye-opening experience for me, like having to navigate that. Where do you even start? Like, where do you start when you've got bots like really functioning like people? It's hard to tell. Where do you start when Twitter is such a place of connectivity and people being seen and democratizing storytelling and people's voice, and also a place where those same people become victimized? I don't have Twitter on my phone because I can't take it, So how do you manage both of those things? Where do you start?
Yeah, I think the first place we start is recognizing that happens, not pretending like it doesn't happen, not hiding behind falsehoods. The team at Twitter recognizes that these are problems, and there's work underway to address bots and the like. We get a lot of feedback and heat, rightfully so, about the speed in which we're executing. But I promise you that it's not falling on deaf ears. There's engineers working on many of these problems right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing when these solutions ship. It's exciting to be on the side of creating the solution. It provides some degree of frustration knowing that it takes time between when you conceive of the idea and when you actually ship it to market. So we're at that place where we're working on it, and we'll be delivering it to market in the not so distant future. The other thing that we think about, and one of the benefits of leading this team, is that we have really amazing researchers, some of which that focus on social science and just human interaction and behavior. And one of the ways that we're thinking about addressing this problem beyond the technological solve is on just human behavior itself. And so you might have seen we released some speed bumps where if you share a link, we'll ask you if you actually read it. And we found that most people don't read the articles that they're sharing. And
Dantley, I can't tell you, just to pause on that, on the Blavity News side, and all of our brands, all the Blavity sides, Blavity brands, Travel Noir, AfroTech, etc., we can check on Google Analytics who's actually clicking. Twitter is our worst driver of traffic, but like where we get the most conversation, it's always fascinating to me. So I loved that new feature. So thank you.
And we're thinking more about how do we help people make more effective decisions on what they're coming across, because it's easy to get your emotions all enraged based off of sensationalism that might happen in a news story, or just fake news manufactured to cause division. And we know that there's many parties both inside this country and outside this country that are trying to sow division through social media and the internet.
Absolutely. So I want to shift to diversity a bit. One of the things I've admired about you is how unapologetic you are about bringing all of us along the way, and really like reaching out to people all over the country, and making sure that people feel welcomed in tech. I think a lot of people at the director level and above, especially in the C-suite, have good intentions, but rarely are as explicit as you are when you're posting jobs, when you're sharing on Twitter. So tell me about kind of your journey towards really making your part of your purpose in life, diversifying the technology and design space.
So first of all, thanks for the recognition. It all comes from a very dedicated person in my life, my dad, who passed away 10 years ago. And he was a rock for me, and he was very vocal about social justice and the civil rights as I was growing up as a kid. And he wanted to make sure that as I became an adult, I could navigate this world as a Black person. So when he passed, I looked around, because I had on a number of occasions thought about getting out of tech, because I often was the only Black person in the room, and it's a lonely existence. And the more I climbed in my career, the even lonelier it was, and not seeing anyone else like me. So I basically vowed to myself that I would continue leaning into doing great design work, but I wasn't going to be alone anymore. I wanted to bring everyone else along with me and kick down some of the doors that were open to me when I was young, because of my privilege and my dad's foresight in terms of introducing me to computers. And I mean, a lot of that is just, for me, it was just luck. I was lucky to have been born in the circumstances that I was to be given these opportunities. And I want that for everyone. And I've seen from creating products of all kinds, whether it's payments, games, or entertainment, that when I leaned into my culture, when I leaned into what would benefit people beyond just the mainstream and mass market, that was actually commercially successful. So the more I saw success from doing that work, the more I wanted to do it. But then I also realized I could not do it alone. So one of the other motivations was, how do I scale this work? How can I make it live beyond just my own personal interactions at a single company? How can I bring more people along and enable this ability and point of view to cascade across all of tech? And my hope was that by doing that, the work becomes better, it becomes more thoughtful, and we're also thinking through the societal consequences of the product and technology solutions that we're creating beyond just the implications it has in Palo Alto.
Right, right. I think what you said resonates certainly with me and how I was raised. And one of the reasons why I started AfroTech was because I quit my job. I got out of tech on the kind of traditional side to start a company. And then I got into the fundraising side and the startup world and realized it's the exact same thing, and I think there's a lot of us that feel that way, that we want to be a part of the solution. We want to bring people and lift as we climb. And yet I do feel like sometimes, especially in the corporate, diversity space, there's a lot of talking and not a lot of action. What do you think has made the difference for you to actually be able to execute? I believe everybody has good intentions, but I would love to see you multiply across all of our companies, all of our sponsors, all of our clients. So what advice do you have? And what do you think made the difference for you?
I think ultimately it was that I had to be hands-on in doing the work. It was important to me to build relationships with people of diverse backgrounds, whether it be Black people, women, Latinx, across the board. Those relationships help fuel me and drive me and provide me inspiration. And so I just rolled up my sleeves and made sure I reached out to people. I spoke up. I attended events and meetups to get to know folks in the community. I provided, any secret that I picked up over the years. I wanted to be a complete open book to enable more people to get in the game. And I saw that there was actual traction by doing the work. And I think one of the sad things about diversity and inclusion in a lot of leadership roles is that people just aren't doing the work. They're That's doing right. A lot of talking, and they're saying nice things, on internal corporate websites or on their social media accounts. But, I was staying up till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, searching for candidates. I was getting up early in the morning because I was on the West Coast and the candidate was on the East Coast. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to get in front of them when it was most convenient for them. I was flying across the country or across the ocean. I just hired a person who's starting at our company now, and I flew to London to meet her. Right. And when I came to Twitter, she came to Twitter because—
in a pandemic, I imagine, because she just started.
Yeah.
In a pandemic, that is doing the work. Oh my goodness.
So I think that ultimately, I firmly believe in the keep it simple rule, and in most cases, it's just about the effort. And just, I wish more people would shut their mouth and use their hands and do the work versus just talking about how difficult and challenging it is. It is difficult and challenging, but most things that are worthwhile are difficult and challenging. But when you put in the work, you get to know people and their motivations, and then you create inclusive environments where people want to stay at your companies, then people are also drawn to your culture and your teams. And
Right.
I think that's also a missing factor when we talk about inclusion and diversity in tech.
Right. Right. It's as if everybody's like, well, we need to get them in the door, right? But it's just a constantly revolving door. So if the pipeline's leaky, not that we have a pipeline problem, but if the pipeline's leaky once you're in the door, then it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. So yeah, so many gems there. And I know many folks may feel like they get pigeonholed into being into the diversity team, the D&I team. And I think it's so important that people know that they can actually, perhaps more powerful, to be an expert in your field, be incredibly good at what you do, and bring people along the way. And, you know, at AfroTech, I tell my team this all the time, and I know it pisses off a lot of people, but I just really don't want it to be a D&I conference. You know, in other words, I always am like, you got to teach something. We got to talk about skills. Like, we can't have this conversation around, you know, deficit. And I also don't want everybody getting on stage talking about how diverse they are when they're really not. You may be the best of the worst, you know, but like, no, you know, we can't pat ourselves on the back in a conference full of Black folks. Like, that, let's focus on the action, right? So yeah, really appreciate you, and lots of kudos for that. Wrapping up, because we're winding down on time, just to go into some tactical advice for those folks who are in the kind of senior management roles in product design, engineering, UX, UI research, etc., that are thinking about that SVP, C-level positions, who may feel tired because they've been doing this for 10, 15 years, who may feel tired because they've got families, you know, that they're taking care of and they're burned out. What advice do you have for them? And how did you kind of manage your own life in that period before you got to where you are today?
That's a great question, and one I felt over the course of several years of, you know, you're grinding, you know, trying to have impact, and at the same time doing the additional work of trying to represent for your community, which sometimes your peers don't have to do. It's actually, I'd say in most cases, your peers don't have to do that. And we end up caring so much about our community that we're doing two jobs. The people of color and women in leadership positions are both the D&I leads for their respective areas. Right. They're the recruiters for their respective areas, and they have to do the functional work. Now, just imagine if that additional set of responsibilities was spread across everyone who worked in tech and had leadership positions. I think you'd see a transformation in terms of who is getting promoted and who is getting rewarded and possibly fired if those incentives were changed. In terms of how I've been able to navigate these situations, one of the most important things I've done for myself is I have my own personal board of advisors. I never named it as such, but essentially that's what these folks are. They're friends of mine who are mentors to me, and all of them, except for one person, works in a completely different field. And one of my mentors told me, stop trying to be mentored by design leaders. Many years ago, he was like, there's not much more that you're going to get out of talking to more design leaders. So I made sure that the people that I've been listening to are business people, they're marketing people, they're finance people, they're HR people, and they give me not just a different perspective, but even different tactics that I would take in certain situations. They broaden my perspective and worldview. The other thing I would suggest folks do, and this has been incredibly helpful for me, is find hobbies. If you're in tech, find something that you can build and make. You complete the full process
Yeah.
from inception to shipping by doing something as simple as building a puzzle, or you can get even more complex, but and make things from scratch. But just the art and facility of building exercises your brain. It gives you mental space to take a step back from the day to day, and you'll be amazed. And I keep a Moleskine notepad near my personal projects, because something I've been wrestling with all week comes to me, a few minutes after or during one of my hobby activities. And that's been incredibly helpful for me. And I can't tell you how many times I've taken something I've learned from one of my hobbies, and I've been able to apply it into product development. And if I didn't have that space, I don't think I could function as effectively as a creative person. So give yourself that time and space, whether it be self-care or you're building something. Just constantly grinding in the day-to-day will lead to burnout, and
Right.
you might get far early on, but it's not sustainable. And then you get to a point where you just hate everything, and you don't want to be here anymore. And this whole experience, especially for folks who aspire to lead teams and go into senior management, is a marathon. And also it sets a great example for your teams, because they see that you're taking care of yourself, and they'll take that example and take care of themselves.
That's right. That's right. Wow. So many things we could still talk about. So you're going to have to come back. This will be your, fifth year at AfroTech? I think you've spoke almost every year.
I think that's right. I'm surprised you still want me at AfroTech, given how many times I've been with you.
Well, you keep switching jobs and keep doing cool stuff. So, I don't know what else is cooler than this, but we've got a lot. Hopefully next year we'll be able to talk about some of the results and the impacts on, the Black community and Black Twitter. So last question, because I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience that are itching to work at Twitter, especially now that they know they've got you. What should people be thinking about when they're applying to Twitter? What do you say to folks who maybe really hate Facebook, Twitter, and friends right now because of so many reasons, but then also are kind of like, maybe I should work there and change it from within? Like, what do you say, and what should people consider when they're making that first step to work with you?
So there's a few things. One, let me know what your superpower is. Beyond just your LinkedIn profile and your resume, I want to know the full story behind what motivates you. I've said repeatedly, I'm building the Avengers at Twitter. Everyone has their superpower. So let me know and my team know what that is. We're a platform for the world, for many different interests and types of people. And that means that the diversity in your life matters at Twitter, and it matters to me. I can completely understand the frustration or a pushback on social media, and the jaded point of view and perspective that people might have. But no, two things. One, Jack is the real deal. I wouldn't be at Twitter if it wasn't for him. He grew up in Ferguson, and he was on the ground when the protests were happening because of Mike Brown's death. And that means I can have those conversations with my manager, who's the CEO of this company, and they're real conversations. And then know that you have that same advocate in me. You don't need to come to me with a 25-page pitch deck on why we should be doing the right thing. We'll have a very short conversation about brainstorming solutions, and then we'll get to work. I think that's one of the core differences that you'll find by coming to Twitter versus any other company in tech.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. And I can't wait to see all the changes and impact that are coming our way.
Thanks, Morgan. It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to having that conversation in a year about the positive changes that we make.
All right, y'all. You heard it here first. Tweet them. All right. Bye, everybody.